So yeah, welcome everybody to our October meetup. It's UX month, which is awesome. We're going to learn about why UX isn't just about coloring in. But before we get into it, I just want to run through a few things about NA Tech. Firstly, we are recording this call, so don't say anything that you don't want to be in the recording as such. NA Tech, we are a meetup where we do techie talks for techie people. One of our rules is that there's no selling at our events, and we are kind of one of the few events in the Northeast that actually do this and enforce this. So we would politely ask you to not sell and not do any recruitment during the event. Who are we? So if I can move on, move slide. So yeah, hello. If you can't see the cameras, I'm Chris, one of the organisers for NA Tech. We've also got James and Mark on the call. Getting things away.
Sorry, can we shout out Martha as well? Because Martha's not on this slide.
Sorry, apologies. Martha's not on the side. Yeah, Martha's also on the call. I don't know if she's muted, but yeah. So if you have any questions about NA Tech or any feedback for the guys after the talks, then obviously you can get in touch with the speakers themselves, but also you can get in touch with any of us either directly or via any of the social media channels, which I will get to in a second. If you wanted to come and speak at NA Tech, please do get in touch. Or for example, you saw somebody at a recent conference, or you know somebody who might want to speak at NA Tech, please let us know, and we can by all means get in touch with them and hopefully see if they want to come and speak at one of the events in future. So as I said, social media stuff. We are pretty much on all the major social media platforms. We've got the website ne.technology, Meetup, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. We're also on Discord now. I'm not going to expect you to remember that link unless you can write it down now if you'd like. But the easiest way is if you just go to the website, and at the top of the website, there's a nice, lovely little link which will take you straight to Discord. We try to kind of stay in those channels as much as possible, and any questions that come through, we'll obviously get back to you as soon as possible. But also, it's just a communal place. If there's anything you want to talk about, any feedback for the speakers or NA Tech, then please do get in touch. Big thanks to our sponsor, Scott Ledgick. So without those guys, we wouldn't really be here. Usually we do actually have free beer and pizza, but unfortunately, COVID and that, we're obviously doing a virtual meetup. And no, I'm sorry, I can't send you a pizza and I can't send you some free beers as much as I would love to, but yeah, not this time, sorry. So our speakers for tonight, we have Jason and Helena. So Jason is a UX researcher at DWP. He's going to be telling us about some UX horror stories. So looking forward to that. We also have Helena Hill. She's going to be speaking about dashboard UIs and basically giving us the rundown of what good UX looks like and how we should be doing this in the future. Both of them obviously are on the social media channels, as you can see in the slides, but you can get in touch with them afterwards or via any of the NA Tech guys. So just before I jump straight into the talks, I would ask any questions that you have for the guys. Please do just chuck them in the chat. And we will address them at the end. We'll do both talks first and then go back to the questions at the end. So yeah, without further ado, I guess I will hand that on to Jason. So Jason, feel free to take the screen.
Okay, right, so I can begin. Hi, hello, welcome to UX Horror Stories. It's horror stories because it's October and that's Halloween. So I thought I'd share some really horrible things I've encountered while working in general UX and stuff. So as you can see there, Agile Time Lloyd, you can contact me if you want to say something nice to me. If you don't, or if you say something nasty, I'll probably just mute you because, yeah, that's UX. Right. Hello, I'm Jason. I'm a user researcher, independently working currently with DWP. User researcher that likes to blend up pop culture and product development. So if you imagine I'm kind of like a paranoid Columbo, that's kind of how I approach things, but also blend in some pop culture because it makes things accessible. Right. So off we go. Are you afraid of the dark and these horrible things I'm going to show you? So I'm not going to lie. I came up with the title before I came up with the talk for this because Halloween, UX, horror, it all blends into one. And I thought, what could I show you that's a true UX horror story? I could show you awful, awful interfaces like this lift to somewhere. I'm not particularly sure how that's supposed to work, but it exists. Or I could show you Microsoft and these awful, awful things. And this looks how my wife uses the toolbar in Microsoft Word, and it's absolutely abhorrent, and I can't tell you what half the buttons on that does. Or I could show you about how UX is badly used within general companies, such as not actually delivering what users want, because marketing has a hunch that we should definitely integrate everything into Snapchat because that's the future. These awful, awful things are all UX horror stories, but I decided to take a slightly different approach. So I submit these stories for the approval of the Midnight Society, and hopefully we can learn something nice along the way. So let's kick off with the first story. A company motivated by base appetite alone, repeating the same processes by instinct, attacking difference, it's patient, monotonous, and dull. And the tenet that brings us across everything is that's not how we do things around here. And let's just share a scene from this. So what are we working on for the next quarter? Ask the UX team. We have no UX intent for the next 3 quarters, says the product leadership. So what do you actually want us to do? Just, you know, UX. This is an actual conversation I was privy to, and I felt like my throat had been cut. Not literally, but, you know, metaphorically. We're in metaphors here. So, zombies. This is what to do when your team or company are infested with zombies. Why zombies, you ask? Because these creatures are nothing but pure motorized instinct. We must not be lulled by the concept that these are our family members or our friends. They are not. They will not respond to such emotions. Zombies are dead teams and companies reacting purely on instinct. And you end up with quotes like these. We asked our users what they wanted, and they got angry with us. It's pointless speaking to them. So the teams go along like a ghost ship, completely not responding to anybody or anything. It's acting off appetite alone and not having any innovation or growth. They just lumber, consume, and move on to the next. Truly, when there's no room left in hell, the dead will walk the earth. Also, this is from Dawn of the Dead, and that, for kids of the 90s, is actually Keenan and Kel's dad. Yeah, there we go. So why can I speak about zombies? Because I did my thesis on zombies for my master's. Look, there I am. Look how young I am. Look how unbitter I am about everything and how happy I am before the virus, the plague, and working in product management. I'm also endorsed for zombies on LinkedIn. So I'm actually I know quite a lot about zombies. So it's quite good. So what to do with zombies? Zombies can be stopped by removing the head or destroying the brain. So how does it apply to product management? And what do we actually mean from that? So look, dissertation here. So we have to remove an ideology and therefore a thought process, destroying an individual, incapacitate and remove it from the public sphere. Destroying the brain removes the ideology and silences the individual. So how do we silence the individuals that create zombies within products? How do we stop zombie products, zombie teams, all of those things? Just a short disclaimer. I wish I didn't have to put this in, but I thought it best not to. Please don't behead co-workers when we tell you to remove the head, destroy the brain. So if we can't do that, how do we stop it? Bait. Zombies are motivated by pure appetite. So how do we appeal to those appetites? We have to do some discovery to find out what they're interested in. Find out who the zombies are in your company and find out what can actually appeal to them. Is it money? Is it just pride or earning something like an award or just to have their name mentioned in some kind of newsletter? We've got to find out what appeals to them. And then we've got to give them more and more and more. But what if we can't do that? What if teams can't be reasoned with? What if we can't actually appeal to their best nature? and actually work within the confines of our business. How do we work with zombies then? You've got to confront them directly. And the way to do that, you've got to be direct, identify the zombie threat, engage with them critically. Don't criticize them, because zombies are very, very emotional beings. You've got to extinguish the need for the appetite. So find out what they keep doing and find out why it's the wrong thing for the company or the service or the product to be doing. And you've got to bring the aversions brought forward. So you've got to make it painful for them to do the things they don't want to do. And that's how you extinguish the zombie threat. It should all be over. Enjoy a pint down the pub. Shaun of the Dead, included in my dissertation. So we now move on to another story, where a new UX team join an established company. They soon find things start moving by themselves. The testing and analysis appear from the past without explanation. It becomes clear that the UX team are not alone. And despite moving on, the old team members haunt their every move. Something's happening. The product team is haunted. So how do we work within a haunted product team? First, we've got to acknowledge that something is with us that we don't understand. We don't comprehend it. We have to work within those rules and boundaries. But what happens? How do we know that we're being haunted? Well, situations like this, where the UX team enter planning, but backlog's already been prioritized and things are happening that can't be explained, and the entire product team knows what to be doing, even though the UX team hasn't done any work on it. How does that happen? And then we end up with more quotes, such as, "I'm not sure what you can achieve in speaking to end users." And possibly the worst thing I've heard is this. Well, for a while, "I don't see why we should waste time speaking to our users. We have our personas. Personas are good. Personas are really good when used correctly. So this persona says that they're an early adopter and use cool technology innovations like Windows 98 Plus. The plus shows that they're hip." I've put in Windows 98 Plus, but it was MySpace. Someone said they used MySpace, and this was 2014, and I almost cried. So the best way to deal with ghosts, perform a UXicism, and that's a pun I really approve of. So how do we do that? You invite the experts in. So open the hen house, let the foxes in, and let's see what happens. Bring your users in. And then you end up with awkward conversations like this, but it's important to power through. So this is a conversation that's been slightly adapted, but it definitely did happen with a company I'm not legally allowed to mention. But hola, you said you were going to bring users. You were joking, right? No, I'm bringing in 3 people to sit with a team so they can learn from them. Oh, they'll actually see what we do then. Yes, they will. They'll see what they do and they can learn from them. And what's brilliant about bringing users in-house is they get to see how everything's made, and it puts a face to people. So developers see a bug and they actually see if something's a bug or something, they actually can see who it's affecting. Getting people in front of users is one of the best things you can do. And it breaks up monotony, and it brings human contact, and it shows a human side to things. Perfect for moving on from the undead. Open the windows, let people in. Be transparent in your organization. Have an open Trello board to show your roadmap. Show what's going on. Show intent, and then people can criticize it, critique it, and work with it. And then hopefully you can get rid of the ghosts and exercise your entire product team and move forward. So we move on to one of the darker stories this evening. So a small product team is working on a transformation project. As the ask is new and the team have very little experience, they've decided to ask for some external help. Can anyone see where this is going yet? Many put themselves forward, but one offer beguiles the senior management. We've got vampires. Vampires have been invited directly into the organization, and it's very difficult to get rid of them. Yes, they've brought in some naff consultants. And I'm going to be very careful here and say not all consultancies are bad. I've worked with some brilliant ones, but there's a specific breed of vampiric consultants. And if you don't believe me, let's compare them. So vampires and consultancy, bad faith consultancy, sorry, they must be invited in. So you've got about a request for tender. You've got to invite a vampire in. They talk in riddles. They don't actually say what they're going to do or what they actually mean. I definitely can relate to that. They seduce with promises and amazing things they can give to you if you just submit to them. Also works for both. They're very predatory in nature. I'm pretty sure that everyone's had some kind of experience with a predatory consultancy. They're nesting creatures. Speaking from experience, once you get them in, it's very, very difficult to get them out. And it can break up entire companies. It creates civil war. It changes ideologies. It's horrible. And there are also blood-sucking parasites, as I need to say, not all consultancies, but some that I've been privy to. It's not good. And then the vampires often end up presenting you something like this. We've got the perfect solution for your small business. Yes, we sold the same system to a multinational bank. Yep, this has definitely happened. It was abhorrent. And no one listened to the UX team. So how do you combat this? How do you face down the vampires? So I've got 3 simple tips for vampire removal, and thankfully they're all very similar to how you get rid of vampires in real life. Sunlight. So the sun is a massive ball of angry fire. So you've got to expose ideas out in the open. Bring the ideas and systems out, put them under great scrutiny, air them outside of the bubble of a product or service team. Engage with local communities like this one. Ask if the actual, engage with the wider community, find out what's the actual thing. It takes a village to make a product, so engage with them, speak to people, find out what works. Don't be in your own isolated bubble. Work together as a team and a community to build something. Don't just build it away in a little box. If you build something in a box for 6 to 12 months, come out and nobody wants it, that's nobody's fault but your own. You've been sold something. Engage with people. Think critically with it. Link to that. Interrogate ideas. Hold them open to scrutiny themselves. Look, vampires don't have reflection. Neither do some bad consultants. They'll just sell you whatever they can. Find out what works. Interrogate the ideas. Put them to users. Bring people in. Make people think about it slightly differently. Pitch it to higher ups. Pitch to people who know what they're talking about. Engage people. It's really simple, but it's so difficult to actually get people to do these things. And if that doesn't work, stake through the heart, a more direct approach with quantitative and qualitative information. So use user interviews. If you as a UX team or a product team know that something doesn't sound right, test it with users. Test it iteratively, do A/B testing, put it in front of users as a value add, test with internal stakeholders, test with everybody, do thematic analysis to actually find out what the problems are. And you can have a straight target to kill what you know is not right. I'm not saying to kill consultants. Some are very good, but kill bad ideas because there's too many out there. So qualitative, quantitative is something that I really love. Also thematic analysis. It served us well and it really works to actually understand what users need and how you can serve them in a proper way. And hopefully the vampires will move on. Little tiger there, looking smiling little man. Right, and now we come on to one of the final stories. An organization is thriving. It's experiencing growth and applause. It's loved. And then the plucky young UX team find that the culture is slowly starting to change around them. One by one, colleagues start adopting new ways of talking, and open doors and open meetings start to close. Change begins, but nobody can see where it's coming from. Something doesn't feel right. What is it? It's the thing. It's an awful monstrosity from Lovecraft. It's a horrible, absorbing mess, and it's in your product team. How do you get rid of it? This thing doesn't want to show itself. It wants to hide inside a limitation. It will fight if it has to, but it's vulnerable out in the open. If it takes us over, then it has no more enemies, nobody left to kill, and then it's won. It's poor culture. It's a culture of thinking within a product team where you don't want to expand and grow anymore. This is different to the zombies. The zombies were kind of passive and just would move between others. This is an aggressive form of culture within some companies, and it's very difficult to get rid of. And it presents itself in really awful ways, such as this. Our users are very engaged. Look at our feedback platform. And just to specify, this is legally not Jason in the bottom right-hand corner. Are you ever going to build anything they've asked for? No. Why? You're treating your customers with disdain. That's bad. That's really, really bad. They pay for your job. Like, no, engage with them. Be positive. Try to work with them. Culture is all about assimilation and self-preservation. And if you reward the wrong things, it gets out of control. People want to be seen as doing the right thing within their cliques and groups. It becomes a really negative place to work if all of a sudden everything you say is kind of counted against. You've got to work together to find the thing and beat out the poor culture. Or you end up with awful things like Gantt. Like, Gantt charts should not be in any position close to an agile work environment, but I've seen them being superimposed because that's what a culture has decided. No, I can't be as animated as I want to be, but no, this is bad, this is bad. But what is the thing though? How can we know if it actually isn't enormous? You have people who are pushing processes over people. That's bad. I mean, you should really be putting people into processes and working together as teams to embrace strengths. Disdain for users. I've heard awful things said by users in the past, and that's not on. You should engage with users and not call them out. You should engage with them directly, solve their problems and work together. Disenfranchised teams. If you become monotonous and zombified, how are you going to work together to solve a problem? You need to be engaged. And how do you do that? By knowing which problems to solve. So you've got to have value to yourselves. Cliquery kind of goes out saying, links to gossip. Like if there are cliques and people who are wanting certain things built in product teams, it becomes a negative place to work. You're not actually solving real problems. Passivity. It's awful to see product teams just slowly fester. And you also have people who prioritize busy over doing actual valuable work. Some days people aren't particularly busy because they've done everything they need to do. We don't work for hours work. We should actually work on problems and projects. We should move to that way of working. That doesn't always happen. And I'm sorry to say, if your culture is beers and bands, you don't have a culture at work. You've basically got someone with a drinking problem who likes to share things from Lad Bible in the Slack, and that's not good. And no. So how do we do this? Oh, sorry, I've also forgot. We've got potentially the worst quote I've ever heard. It's not our fault that our users are too thick to figure out how the system works. Cultures like this lead to people saying this in meetings. And then you know that it's too late and everyone has been consumed by the thing. It becomes a truly negative thing to work for, and it's very difficult to get out. So how do you defeat the thing? Well, look at RJ McCready. Look at that beard, luscious. It took him over a year to grow that, you know. Anyway, so the way they find the thing is you've got to isolate the code, the roots of it, understand what it is, and then go after it. But the best way to do this is to actually take this and take it to heart. The team of stakeholders too. You've got to realize that the people you work with are stakeholders within the project. As a user researcher, you shouldn't just be blocking things because you don't think it's the right thing. You should be taking people with you and showing them how things work and who users are. The team of stakeholders, and you should definitely use that to your advantage. Understand what motivates them, work with them, and grow together. Don't just isolate them away. It's bad. Dynamite. Like the way you've got to do it, sometimes you need a big, bold action, whether that comes from a grassroots thing or it comes from the top. You need to put a stake in the ground to say who you are, what you stand for, and what value you deliver to people. Otherwise, you're just kind of left out alone in the cold. And yes, this is just an excuse to post more gifs of Kurt Russell. So the best way to actually avoid this and all these horror stories is to avoid getting into a horror story to begin with. How do you do that? Well, there are very simple principles when using with UX that actually help you do this. Speak to your users. I can't remember how many bad conversations I've had where they've said, oh, well, we know who our users are. Great. Who are they? Oh, well, we've got some personas that we think we made. We didn't speak to anyone, but these are the personas. No, speak to your users. They're human. They want to speak to you. There are so many times I've gone out with our entire team and our users are happy to see us because they put a name to a face to a name, and they actually understand there are people who are building their things. They want to speak to us. They'll all have opinions. Some of them are incredibly good ideas. We need to work with them. Celebrate your users. Bring them into the office. Hold events for them. Tell them that they actually matter. Use these things with them. Everyone does user research. I don't care if you're an architect with 30 years experience and you know everything, you're still coming with me to speak to a user directly. You need to see these people. You need to see the problems. There's a project I worked on a few years ago where the tech architects had decided exactly what they were going to build and didn't need to conduct any user research. And I was just a box ticking exercise for them. That's wrong. I took them out and he changed his mind completely. You need to take people out. You can see things and it builds a good rapport between users, the product team, and just the entire organization. It works really well. Engage with real problems. Don't make stuff up and solve them. We could all create little to-do lists with tiny little things on and tick it all off by the end of the day and feel good about it, but it doesn't do anything. Engage with real problems. Look at that thematically. What are your users actually trying to do? Engage with the true intents, then meet them. Then you test it. You test everything. Test it again and again. A/B testing, quantitative testing, look at data, look at qual, test everything and find out what you're actually doing. If you do that, you can stave off the vampires. You can scare zombies off. You never have a need to invite a vampire in your house, and hopefully the thing shrivels up and dies. Hopefully. Because you just use good UX principles. That's what it should be. And every company should do this, and you should avoid it. It's a long, arduous journey to get people to convert thinking this way, but it pays off in dividends, and it all works, and it should be all happy, all together. And my voice is going hoarse, so I'll probably best end the talk with a nice, happy ending. I couldn't resist that. Okay, and I think that wraps it with me. Thank you. I'm aware that I've just spoken very, 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 very quickly, but I have a cat on my lap, and I just thought best to end it off here. So you can follow me on Agile Time Lord if you like. Website's underneath there, and I think that's me done. So I think I'll stop presenting, and then I will pass on to Helena.
Next up, we have Helena Hill, so UX consultant and trainer. She's going to be speaking to us about dashboard UIs. So I'll hand it over to Helena.
Yeah, there are a couple of scary things in here. Not as many as Jason's, I've got to say, but yeah, there are a few scary things. Can you hear me okay, everybody? Everybody see my screen all right? You can see the boxing gloves are out, I hope. Anyway. Well, welcome everybody to tonight's event. It's been great so far. I love Jason's. Oh my gosh, Jason, we're going to have to compare notes because I was taking some notes and I was thinking, my goodness, yeah, there's a few horror stories that I have also witnessed as well, which were very similar to those. So I think we're gonna have to compare notes sometimes. But welcome anyway to my part of the presentation. So just a little bit of an introduction to me. That was before lockdown, and I had short hair, and then lockdown happened, and this did. So yeah, there you go. What I'm doing generally is I'm an experienced strategist and consultant. I promise you, I'm not a vampire. I'm really not. If I'd known how to quickly get this screen thing, I was going to try and see if I could find a vampire thing, but no, I'm not. So I kind of have moved sort of a little bit away from UX in terms of consultancy in a way that kind of UX and CX and service design, it's all just so inextricably linked that I tend to find myself working with large organizations on these kind of parts of their processes and what they, and often if I'm brought in as a UX consultant, it turns out to be anything but, or the UX consultancy becomes a small part of a much bigger picture. So we're talking organizational change, breaking down silos, communication, that kind of thing as well. Because as Jason quite rightly said in his presentation, you need to have the right environment. You've got to have the right people in there, and they have to be in the right frame of mind, and they have to want to engage users. I mean, that's just, you know, and if we don't, then sometimes that is part of my job, and I have to kind of almost, you know, state the obvious before we can even move on to that bit. So yeah, that was a good point there, Jason, very much so. I do a lot of speaking around UX. Obviously this year it's been a little bit quieter. Often I can be found at places like Build It Right, Digital Leaders, and doing a lot of kind of in-person talks, but obviously it's all been via this year, but that's fine, that's okay. When I'm not doing that, my consultancy, my other hat is that of mentor, and I'm the digital UX mentor at Northumbria University for Generator, that's based in Newcastle. For those of you who don't know them, do get in contact. I'm vice chair of the Sphere Network. We're all about digital influence, leadership and transformation within the region. And I sit on the advisory board for Digital Union as well. So do look up at any of those. There's lots of great people trying to do lots of brilliant things up here in the Northeast. When I'm not doing any of those, as you might be able to see behind me here, I spend a lot of time building Lego, which is a bit bizarre for a woman of my age, maybe you might think, but there you go. I love building Lego, and that's my kind of that's my hobby. I also walk my 3 Labradoodles, and usually at this point we're in a physical environment. I get lots of R's, so please feel free to do that if you'd like to do that. That's Barney or Steve,
Aw.
baby Charlie. Thank you so much for that. And I have a bit of a weird obsession with a guy called Lloyd Wright, who's an architect, who was an architect. He died about 50 years ago, but I'm still completely obsessed with him. And in a former life, I think I was an architect. I mean, I can only say that, and I think it probably worked with this guy. But there we are. That's for another day. That really is horror story stuff, isn't it? And then if I'm not doing any of those things, actually, what I really love doing is building Lego while I'm watching Formula One on a Sunday afternoon. So I guess you're all thinking what a bit of a tomboy she is, but there you go. That's just how I am. So I guess, you know, kind of dashboard versus user, or dashboard versus, technology versus user, dashboard versus user. Does it actually have to be this way? Well, no, it doesn't. And if you do some of the things that Jason quite rightly explained in his presentation, as in getting people involved right from the get-go, getting users involved right from the get-go, then it shouldn't be this way at all. So, you know, let's just get a little bit more serious for a minute. I'm quite pleased here and proud of my my Canva abilities. And basically, there's 2 types of user dashboards. Typically, there's kind of those of internal user data for those working for an organization as such, you know, and for example, maybe to track KPIs, goals, customer data, customer acquisition, for example, as you can see on the left there. And that on the right, you know, for users who have maybe purchased or are using a B2B or B2C type data dashboard. So that might be things like, for example, managing tasks or managing finances, messages, news feeds, or whatever within a dashboard environment. Going into that in a little bit more detail, the kind of 3 types of dashboard typically are those of strategic dashboard. So generally a strategic dashboard is one in which we maybe track KPIs against organizational goals, summarize data, for example, as you can see here, over set time frames, such as new customers, maybe an NPS score, that lovely high level score. That's for another day. Potentially customer acquisition, that kind of thing you might see on a strategic dashboard. They're generally pretty high level, as you can see. So it would take some digging down maybe to get into the sort of the next level of data required after that. But generally strategic dashboards are an overview of this kind of data. Following on from that, you might see, for example, this is an example of more of an analytical dashboard, for example, which is more, maybe could be described as more of a reporting tool for large amounts of data, maybe used to drill down to compare and contrast, for example, and commonly used by people, you know, people in organizations such as business analysts for insights, for example. And the last type of dashboard really want to show you, and these are very high level types, by the way, due to time constraints today, I could spend an hour at least on each of these, but operational dashboards, which generally give a kind of an at a glance snapshot of what is happening day to day in an organization. So for example, customer service, you know, what is happening in the here and now, what's happening real time, how many people have we got waiting to have calls answered, how many agents are at the ready, how many are actually, you know, how long is it taking, for example, to solve a you know, problem. Oh gosh, at the bottom there we have a word, and it's oh my, that's scary, isn't it? That's been a very scary word in the last week or so, that Excel. Oh, it's linked to, let's move on quickly before it gets too scary. Right, so moving on from that, how do people or how do users generally tend to look at dashboards? Well, they tend to look at dashboards generally in the way that they look at websites, and that is the eye is kind of drawn to that left-hand side of the screen. For example, you tend to see the, that's why we generally get navigations either down the left-hand side or along the top. It's why the majority of brands will place a logo in that area, or again along the top. And here we are, here's that kind of here's the how we look at dashboards in the same way. as we look at websites. You'll notice I've used my Formula One there just as a bit of an example. Red Bull is my favorite team, by the way, so I'm really wanting Max and Alex to do a good job this coming Sunday. So that's how we tend to look at them. Now, what's really important with dashboards is that they are a visual display. So the visual display the most important information needed to achieve one or two objectives. So let's have a look. For example, this example here is that of a car dashboard. All right. So everything that you need there is consolidated into one screen, but it only gives you the information that you require in context. So for example, the petrol light will come on when you are running low on petrol. The headlight will come on when, or the dashboard will change color when it gets to a certain level of daylight, for example. The indicator light will only come on when you need it. So the whole idea is that while you've got your eyes on the road, you are still able to look at that dashboard, but you can see very quickly or at a glance what you need to know at that particular time. And that's the key, at a glance. So what we don't want is data puke, all right? We really don't want that. We don't want our dashboards looking like this, where we would have to look with a microscope to be able to see what we want to see. Give them a little bit of, I'll give them a little bit of a let off for the navigation on the left-hand side, but still not brilliant. And we don't want, this kind of burrito type. It's just not good. And anyway, it's far too small, and we can't even see it, for example. But yeah, it was made by Cousin Joey, so hey, we've got to give him a little bit of slack there, haven't we? So the next thing to think about is, one, got to think about how people look at dashboards, but also is, what about our users? Because our users are not always sitting in a comfy hotel room, looking like they're about to have a stock photograph taken with a towel on their head and a laptop. So what are assumption one that you need to think about? Well, users don't always understand your goals, all right? So never assume that your users will do what you think that they will do, because that is not always the case. So that's why we have to make it really clear from the outset, what is it that you want them to achieve by using our dashboard. So here's another lift. Oh, actually, so I've seen the one Jason showed in in his presentation. This is another example of a bit of ambiguity. Goodness knows, it's not quite as complex as the one that Jason showed in his talk, but still, it is slightly unclear, and goodness knows where you'll end up should you press the wrong button, for goodness sake. And then, be like Chad, just maybe give up and go off somewhere if you really can't understand what on earth you're supposed to do, or you're colorblind, for example. So so that's the first thing we need to think about. Always ensure that your goal as a business, all right, and your goal as a dashboard designer is, you've got to ensure that the user can do what they need to do without going round every single house or every single obstacle that you put in the way. Make it as simple as possible. Assumption two is that your dashboard will be used in ideal conditions and environments. Well, yeah, maybe not quite as extreme as this one, for example, but actually, in all seriousness, think about those kind of operational dashboards that I was talking about earlier on in the presentation. All right, dashboards are not always used sitting with a towel on your head in a comfy hotel room, right? They're used out in the field. They're used by, people who are not always sitting at a desk. They're used out and about. So that's something to think about if you are, if you're designing a dashboard that is going to be used outside, maybe a sort of what I would call maybe a normal environment. And the other thing to think about as well is that environment doesn't always mean, are you hanging off the edge of a cliff, or, are you in a boat in the middle of the Atlantic, or are you solving a flood problem or responding to a flood in the middle of Northumberland somewhere. Environment can also mean, also refers to the type of device that your dashboard is being looked at on, or being used on, I should say. And again, so that's, again, I'm just kind of, echoing Jason's thoughts here. You can only you can only know these things, and you can only produce the best thing if you get your users on board with you and you're listening to them right from the very get-go. So, you know, if something's going to be easier for them on an iPad, like you saw there, for example, or likewise with Northumbrian Water, design it for the user in their environment and ask them what they need from it, and get that qualitative and quantitative feedback from them. Assumption 3 is that users read instructions. No, they don't, I'm afraid to say. So what can you do potentially to make that journey through a dashboard and get that kind of that customer retention or that user retention there? Well, one of the things that you can do is produce what we call a wizard. So that is when somebody starts using a dashboard for the first time, you give them a nice little kind of step 1, do this, step 2, do this, step 3, and you kind of put that little got it, or you can put that tiny little cross in the right hand or left hand corner, for example, to make it really difficult for them to get out of it, so they have to use it. But I would imagine that people like me who are fairly impatient, I might not even bother with that. So just make it, if they're not going to use it, offer it, but make the journey through using the dashboard as simple as possible and as intuitive as possible as well. So, you know, we've talked about what's not so good. We've talked about the horror stories, I guess, of dashboards a little bit, and the kind of data puke and that sort of thing. So what's the kind of best practice around dashboard UI? Well, it's a little bit like I alluded to beforehand. I mean, take a very basic website, for example. Generally, we have our header, we have our header at the top, we have our main content, we have a footer. Think of it a little bit in the same way, in that our most important information sits at the top, our important information sits in that kind of middle ground, and our complementary information generally sits at the bottom of the user interface. So what are the lessons really from that is that, design the expected. Not every user cares about you being clever, all right? Just or something being innovative or creating a design for design's sake. They just want to get a job done, all right? So design for that. Yeah, don't try and be clever there. I'm just going to say that, just do what you need to do based on your user research and your user feedback. You would get more joy out of designing a dashboard that users could interact with rather than struggle to understand. And I have seen this on a dashboard before. Why go to the effort of designing this somewhat weird looking letterbox when all you need to do is send your message or something of the like. Use the familiar. Don't try, again, it's this kind of design for design's sake, which I've seen more times than I'd like to admit, to be perfectly honest. Is kind of, we must come up with our own icons. No, you don't need to come up with your own icons. Use what people are familiar with, use what users are familiar with in other digital environments. And again, like this one here, is use familiar behaviors. So if people are using a dashboard on a mobile device, for example, don't make it difficult for them. They know how to use a mobile device. They know to use a thumb to scroll, for example. They know how to close things, to open things, to move around in between screens, for example. Keep it simple. Don't do anything out of the ordinary. But do experiment and test, so iterate based on what your users are telling you. So, you can have a little bit of fun if you want to. So, for example, why have just a boring loaded bar when you could have something a little bit more fun like this? If it works and it's met with approval, then, why not? Avocado. This is actually an example of a micro interaction, that little avocado there. I'm not going to touch the screen because it'll chuck me out again. But that little micro interaction there it's actually on a carb app. So rather than having a normal kind of sort of spinning wheel, for example, we got an avocado juggling fruit. Well, why not? Indeed. And also this one here, that little bit that I gave you, I'm going to try doing this. There you go. That kind of what we're looking for, the word I'm looking for is being kind of responsive, but within a website. So people expect to be able to do all these things. They know what the icons mean. They know how to use dashboards. They know how to use computers. They know how to use their phone. So the key really is persuasion. And that's the big differentiator between companies or businesses or organizations who use these and find they're getting very low user uptake, and those that continue using it, because that's what you want. You want to keep that customer acquisition or that user acquisition. And you can only do that if you purely put some thought and do that user research right at the very beginning. So, you know, after all this, what is it? What does the perfect dashboard actually look like? Well, you saw there, for example, here, I'm just going to play that little bit again. All right, it works just as well if you're going to produce one on a mobile device as it does on a desktop screen, for example. You have used this, used the idea that we have the most important information first, and this is just an example here. Gives you very, very clearly along the top there the most important key pieces of information that the user wants, before then drilling down into what we might consider important and then complementary information. This is a good example of kind of micro interactions. So using micro interactions on dashboard interfaces, there's no reason why you can't use them, and you should be using them. Just show the user that there is something actually happening, or they can move things about, like you can see on here, for example. They can click on this here and they get that micro interaction saying, yes, you can move this and you can drag and drop, for example. We've got one here. This is one of the key aspects of dashboard design, and this is what we call an example, a really good example of enclosure. So this is enclosing the data of a similar type or the same type within what I would call basically boxes. But you can see in this dashboard here, what they've done is they've not only enclosed different types of data, they've given them that little punch, they've given them a bit of a drop shadow there, made them pop out from the page a little bit. It's really easy where to go on the dashboard to see those different types of data. All right, and this is a very simple example and one that is under NDA at the moment, so I can't actually, I've had to put a kind of big grey blocks through everything. But this is an example here of just using colour. Very, very simple use of colour on the right-hand side, just to show where people are, where users are on a journey through a dashboard or through a service that they're using, which is being accessed via a dashboard. So again, we're using normal colors there, a green for go type idea that something is complete if it's green, something that maybe needs more, an amber, for example, it's something that needs a little bit more attention, and for example. So just something simple like color there within a dashboard could make a big difference. And again, here, this is, again, it's not reinventing the wheel, all right? It's using things that users are used to seeing and icons that people are used to seeing. So arrows, check boxes or tick boxes and ticks, just to show people where they are on a wider user journey. So what are the key takeaways from today's dashboard UI lesson? All right, and it's been a bit of a whiz, I know. No ambiguity. Do not leave any space for people wondering, what on earth do I have to do next? Make it simple, make it obvious, and keep them there. Don't try and be clever. All right, don't try and be the one who has to have has to create an elephant with a slide coming out of its bum. Just do what is necessary to get people to be able to use what you want them to use. Most people, I would imagine, will have heard of KISS, which is the keep it simple, stupid. I guess in a way that kind of alludes to what I've just said. Use micro interactions, but don't overuse them. All right, use them where they will create a difference to the user experience, and you'll get that. And you'll get that feedback and you'll know what it is via user testing. Dark UI seems to be the latest in thing now. For example, I kind of use dark now on Gmail, I use dark on Spotify, all those things. So dark backgrounds and a dark user interface is one of the things that is starting to pick up a great deal actually in popularity. Make friends with your users, get them in, talk to them. You've already had this lesson from Jason, but basically it's applies to this too, whenever you're developing something. Test and test again, so iterate. Don't just assume, all right? Don't make assumptions about what your users want. Validate it and then put it into action. Think about the environments in which your dashboards are being used. And when I say environment, I don't mean just hanging off the cliff. I am referring to type of device as well. Understand what you want your users to achieve by using this dashboard. What are your business goals? Right? What are your organizational goals? Right? Because if you don't know that, how on earth can they? So that's a real kind of, it's a really imperative to getting this right. And then this kind of responsive design now within dashboards, again, it's a little bit like that dark UI. We're starting to see more and more of that, because what we want is we want our users to be friends with us forever and ever and ever. And when I talk about customer experience and that kind of advocacy stage and that keeping customers engaged and interacting with them after that post-purchase, that's exactly what we want. Because if they enjoy using it, then their colleagues and friends probably will too, if you're solving those problems. So that's all from me on dashboard design tonight. Hopefully I've brought that in pretty much on time. Now, I know that we were all told we're not allowed to sell, but I was given special permission, I think, tonight. Is that right? Is that right? From the powers that be, from Mark, I think.
I'm sorry, I'm trying to mute myself. Yes, go ahead. You're absolutely fine.
Who said, please tell us about your new venture. So yeah, I'm just going to very, very briefly tell us. So I mentioned beforehand I wear two hats. I am one of UX consultant of the non-vampire type. I really want to make that clear. All right. And the second half of me is a mentor and a trainer. I'm actually in a previous life, or in a former, a secondary school teacher. So I'm definitely an educator at heart. And I guess in a way, this is actually kind of a really great experience for me. Isn't that a funny thing? To be able to put together the Experience Academy, which is going to be launching within the next month. And we're starting with 2 courses, which is going to be UX for Business Transformation. And that is for me fighting to get UX considered along as a strategic tool in large organizations or in any organization, and to be seen as being important as the marketing department and the sales department and whatever else. All right, UX should be up there, and every organization needs a UX, or it needs a UX team. So that's my way of fighting for that. The second one that's going to be launching is going to be a short course, and that is going to be called Say Yes to UX, Getting Buy-in from the Boss. All right, so this is a very typical problem that I've come across in the last 12 to 18 months, and we're going to see if we can knock that one on the head. So please do feel free to sign up. We even have our own playlist, which is made up of all my favorite tunes from the DJ John Digweed, as he's done his bunker sessions during lockdown this year. So even going on there, you'll get to listen to see what is on our playlist.
While we're doing questions, Helena, if you want to stick the link in the chat for everybody, that would be cool.
Will do that.
There's the little man, Jason's doing so.
Oh, hello there. And then that's a big thank you from me as well for coming tonight. And listen in, you can find me at helenahill.com, Helena Hill, UXCX, and somebody called Helena Hill took my LinkedIn URL many, many years ago. So I had to stick a J in the middle. So don't forget the J. That's all I can say. Finished from me. Good evening.
Thanks, Helena. Should we do questions, Chris? There's a few questions.
Yeah, can do. So
I guess
I'm sure Mark's been noting down the questions as we go.
I've been copying them out of the chat, so I don't have to keep scrolling up.
I'll hand it over to you.
So I guess, Jace, the first one's for you. It was from Corey Jenkins, and it was basically about A/B testing. Says, what alternatives to A/B testing do you recommend for smaller organizations?
It depends. So when I use paper testing, it's just like, or mock something up, something like Heroku. You don't always have to do a kind of A/B test to validate an idea. So I think once you validate an idea and understand the intent, and actually understand what the user's wanting to achieve, if you can do that in a very simple way, you don't necessarily have to do A/B testing. You just have to understand, are you solving the problem? I hope that makes sense. I think we sometimes layer UX as like gatekeeper language, when really it's just like, speak to the user, find out does it fix the problem. Yes, Harry. Find out does it fix the problem. Like, Harry needs a bath, so he's going to currently have a bath, and that will fix his problem. It's that kind of thing. So it's just.
Corey, you can unmute yourself if you want, and actually, see if I answers your question. I've let people unmute themselves now.
No, yeah, it's just basically a question around, if you haven't got a huge customer base, then how do you engage with customers to be able to get these answers?
Okay.
If the environment that you work in isn't necessarily geared towards newer people in the organization talking to customers yet.
So obviously, like to do the mom test, and like don't like actually engage with people who will give you proper feedback. I think it's finding people who have similarish problems and then working through journeys to figure out what to do. So creating persona types really does work. So you don't have to create a full persona of like understanding who, like, you know, full persona kit. But the best way to do it is just kind of understand what the core problem is and then testing it repeatedly. You don't, but you can have someone being a devil's advocate. So one thing we can do, say in a design sprint, if you can't find anyone on like third or fourth day, is test with people within the team with the actual ideas, but get them to think about people in the organization who know the problems, and then kind of like play the devil's advocate and then test. It's always great to test with users beforehand, before launching anything, but it's yes. But that's the best way to do is just engage with as many people as you can and kind of reverse engineer it. So kind of do the Black Mirror test on it sometimes that people call it. So like just what's the worst thing that could happen with this to see what will go through. But it is very difficult unless you've got a user base to test with. But find people who represent those things or get as close as you can. I'm sure Helen will probably have some answers to that too.
You can answer that, Helena, if you want. And
Could you just repeat the question there?
yeah, it was about A/B testing. Obviously, A/B testing. What do you recommend for smaller organisations?
Well, A/B testing is pretty easy to, which depends what you mean by smaller organisations, I suppose, in a way. I mean, A/B testing is fairly easy to do, I think, despite no matter what size of the organisation. But I still think if you're not going to go down that route, I kind of echoing Jason's words here, my key is to get some user research done from the outset. And that's something that I advocate with every single small business that I talk to. So, for example, I mean, I kind of recently taught a course this summer on the business transformation thing, and we talked about how you can get feedback from users even in an environment that we're in at the moment. So, for example, focus groups doing online user tests, for example. So even if it's giving a user a task and then watching them complete it, for example. So, there are lots of ways of being able to conduct user research or get the results that you're looking for from an A/B test, but even in a remote way. So I think that would be my suggestion.
Cool. I hope that answers your question, Corey. I guess we've got a few more from a familiar name. There's a couple from Chris Brown. Don't know who that might be. I guess the first one, do the rules of dashboards swap around for countries or languages that are read right to left, i.e. if you're in an RTL region, does the same rules apply?
Yeah, well, I'm going to stick my neck out here and I'm going to say yes. In terms of that, they will apply to that language. So that I'm going to stick my neck out and say yes. My dashboard designs that I've worked on have been based here. So I'm going to just say I am not an expert in that and put my hands up and say so. Jason, what would you say? Anything on that one?
I think you just design for the user in mind. So primarily with government, I'm working for primarily people in the UK, and it's all English, like English or Welsh, and it's primarily left to right. But I think when I've worked in other companies in the past, we've had a dashboard. We try to just have it modularized so users can drag what's most important to them and customize it. So you always have like the big headline at the top, and then I think Fitbit does this quite well. We can just drag and drop. Because I know you've showed that before, Helen. It's the kind of algorithm to customize it. So I think what's better is a modular way that they can design their own dashboard for them to decide what's most important. Unless you're designing.
That is something to bear in mind, especially when it comes that there's that kind of enclosure. One I gave you is that the fact that more and more of these dashboards now you can actually customize them. So you can, like Jason said there, you can drag and drop things as you see fit or what is most important to you when you're using dashboard. But I guess my initial thought is to the question is what does the user do on a daily basis? How do they look at things? So if they read from right to left, then I would imagine that's how that would be designed if they were following best practice.
Cool. I guess the second question from Chris. Would you advocate designing with a top-down approach, i.e. full desktop version, and then reduce to a minimal mobile version, or a bottom-up approach, i.e. do the mobile first, I guess, or something in between?
We've got something in between there as well, haven't we?
Yeah.
This is a really interesting question because I was actually working with a startup the other day that is actually just making this decision right now, startup based over at Northumbria University. And they are busy developing a dashboard for a particular, obviously I can't say too much, but they are developing a dashboard at the moment for very, very differing sets of users. And I know that both of us tonight, both Jason and Wright, have both talked about, I think the word user, if we had £1 for every time we've heard it tonight, would be very rich people. And I think what you have to think about is, who are you designing it for? So when I mentioned there about the environment and where a dashboard is being used, I think that's what you need to design first. So think about where is the biggest use case? Is it going to be, you know, on a desktop, for example, or is it most likely to be used on a mobile device and out in the field? So think about, where are your users going to be using this? And maybe even what time of day, for example, in what environment, and design for them. So it's kind of that typical and very common question we come across. Is it, are we designing for technology first? Or are we designing user first? Design user first. And, you know, think about where they are, what they're doing, and how they're going to be using it and where they're going to be using it, and design that first, and then think about whether you even need to. And that is a question actually I did have at the end of my presentation, by the way, and I took it out, and maybe I shouldn't have done. And that question was, do you even need a dashboard? Maybe that's for another time. You know, to do what it is that you want to achieve and what you want your users to achieve.
Cool. Couple more. Craig H. What are the favorite apps or tools to produce such mockups? That was to you, Helena.
Well, I'll start, probably InVision is my favorite. I like that one. Jason?
I can't draw a design for out, but the ones I've seen work best are Heroku, InVision, and even just paper.
Yeah, on paper. I should have said that, pen and paper, yeah.
Yeah, the reason I said that, Helena, was I've worked in companies before as a contractor where they've outsourced the UX and they've done some great mock-ups. But then because they use specialist tooling, they can't really hand that over to the organization to maintain in future. So that's probably a consideration of mine when I when I recommend a UXer or the work goes out. I think it should be one of the considerations as a handover material.
I think it depends what that organization, what it is you want to do with those designs once they've been over to you. So, for example, if you know, at what point are they being handed to? Are they being handed to you at a point where developers are taking over and then making it into maybe a simple prototype? Do those designs need? I know, are they in the middle? Are they being iterated as we speak? So I think about, you know, do you need them to be changeable internally at a later date?
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
What stage of that design process are you in? Because that's not always a necessarily bad thing, but I guess, you know.
Yeah, because I guess they can take screenshots of the finished product for user guides, can't they? Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Cool. We've pretty much caught up with the chat, so I guess the next person on the list was Joanna. Joanna, do you want to unmute yourself and ask the question, or I'm happy if you don't want to ask it on your behalf?
Yeah, I'm happy to. Hi. I was just wondering, what's the biggest lesson you've learned in user experience design?
Oh my goodness. Oh, I've got so many. I don't know where to start. You know, for me, I mean, I'll just very quickly go, I guess, and then I think Jason probably has covered a lot of the lessons he did in his presentation. I guess the biggest lesson I have learned is never underestimate the size of the job that you're actually going in to do. For me, that's always something that I've learned, is that, you know, as a UX, and I guess I kind of alluded to this earlier, is that as a UX consultant, my job is often incredibly complex, and it's much wider, and never assume that. And I think I'm going to come back to Jason's again here, that people want to listen to users. And it's a case of changing mindset. I would say the majority of my job going into large organizations is changing mindset and changing and getting people talking to each other within departments as well as between departments. So never assume anything. And I guess that's a kind of a major UX lesson anyway, when it comes to kind of users, but never assume anything, and never be surprised by anything either. That's very high level, I know, because I'm kind of come from it from a more strategic role, I guess, but and then be nicely surprised when people are, you know, when your clients are really, you know, up for it and do want to do something and realize that they have an issue that needs solving with user-centric, you know, with a user-centric approach. That's really high level, I know, but it just is something that I come across a lot.
Did you want to add anything, Jason?
Speak to users question.
Yay, again. another pound in the jar.
I mean, I can't really emphasize enough, but user research, and it's that awful GDS poster, user research is a team sport. Take the team out, even if they're an angry old fisherman architect that's been there for 40 years who hates his life and is what you're going to build. Take him out and show him people, because then he realizes a bug for him is actually a really big thing to a user, which completely messes up their day. Like, it's the human connection, because it's users. Like, I think there's a move now to go, instead of user experience and user research, to design experience, to design research. And that's probably a better way to do it, because users is a bit grim. But speak to people and engage them and change the culture that way. Bring the problems to light. Like, to build on a thing before, so I know Helena spoke about the building for apps and stuff. There was a company, I've heard the story before, where a CTO just decided, we're going to build an app because my daughter's always on her phone and we need an app. But it was completely anathema to what they were doing, because what people wanted was a desktop application, because that's where they wanted to do their work. But he just saw his daughter on the app, so on the phone, so he assumed everything's done via phone. That's not what you need. Actually find out what the users want and build around their experience and their wants and needs and intents. Find out what they're actually trying to do and do something better. You know, like old Henry Ford quote, like, don't build faster horses, get them to where they want to get to. And the easiest way to do that is to speak to them and engage with them critically, and to get everyone alongside you to see. It sounds simple, but it's really difficult.
Thank you so much.
Cool. A question from Kath about getting into UX. Kath, do you want to ask it yourself, or I'm happy to read it out if you don't want to?
Well, can you hear me?
Yes. Yeah.
Yes. No, it was, well, just what it says really. If somebody was wondering about moving into the UX area and asking, you know, is it for me? What sort of things would you recommend to find out more, to start making that decision really?
Who wants to go first? Jason, do you want to go first? Or oh, to me? Okay. Well, I'll go first. And as I briefly alluded to in my presentation, I didn't come into UX maybe what is considered to be a more normal way. My previous life, like when I came out of university, I did a music and history degree. And then I went into secondary school teaching, got out after 6 years, thank God. And I got into UX through kind of being a techie, actually. And I kind of did more of the web dev stuff and the web design stuff. And for me, it was more a case of I wasn't happy with delivering something that wasn't going to make an impact. And it was kind of, it was when I realized that the questions that I was asking in the research I was wanting from my clients, and it was this thing called UX, and I was like, oh, this is a new thing, goodness. And you know, I've learned through, I'm not blowing my own trumpet here, but I've learned through personal development, a lot of personal development and a lot of online learning and listening to others and speaking to others in the field. And growing my experience in that way. So, you know, I think the thing to remember is there is no set route into UX. You have to really want to do it. For me, you know, it's something that I am very lucky, and I'm not meaning to sound cheesy or anything here, but I absolutely love what I do. I love it. I absolutely love it. I love seeing the impact it makes. I get a real kick from, you know, seeing something or a new product or new service succeed, or and seeing it and it take whatever the goal is that we're there to do. So, you know, for me, if for now, if you're wanting to get into UX, speak to lots of people in the UX field. Places like the Interaction Design Foundation are a great place to start. IDF, that is for short. And, you know, for 100, I mean, I shouldn't be saying this because I'm starting my own UX Academy at the end of the month, but I genuinely think they are a really great place to start if you just want to learn more about UX. And they have all sorts of courses there, from kind of generic UX 101 type courses to interaction design, you know, heuristics, that kind of stuff. So yeah, take a look on there, speak to lots of people, ask for feedback, maybe start putting a portfolio together. If you're interested in portfolios, there's a lady who I follow called Sarah Doody. That's DOODY. She is brilliant. She's American. She's based in New York, I think, but she is a great one to follow in terms of how to put or how to start putting a UX portfolio together. So lots and lots of places you can go.
Thank you. And that's quite interesting as well to hear about your degree, because mine was actually French and music as well before I fell into tech.
There you go, you'll be a natural.
There you go.
Cool. Question from Elizabeth. Elizabeth, do you want to unmute and ask it?
Yeah, hi, I'm here.
Oh, webcam as well.
Yeah, I know. Sorry, I was off camera earlier because I was making dinner and I figured nobody needed to see me and my Penny dancing around the kitchen. This is my daughter, by the way, who is getting into the UX field. So she's been watching tonight with a lot of interest. So yeah, thanks to both speakers. It's been brilliant.
Is this your little artist, Elizabeth?
This is my artist. Yeah, this is the
your
girl.
Work is fantastic. I've seen it. It's brilliant.
Thank you.
I'm gonna I look like I'm in one of Jason's haunted Halloween houses. I'm kind of glowing.
Yeah, so really, my question was kind of around UI considerations of accessibility. In 22 years in testing and quality, I've seen devs take responsibility, I've seen UX take responsibility, I've seen testing take responsibility, and I've never had a satisfactory answer to the question, who actually should take responsibility for accessibility considerations? And I was just wondering if the speakers had strong opinions either way.
Everyone should be part of definition of done, because if it's not part of the definition, then you haven't got an accessible product. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the first actual test build, but you always have to build with screen readers in mind. So you've got to make sure the thing works, then have to make sure it's actually accessible, because we have a lot of things that are accessible, but they're not usable. So you need to actually have that from the start in mind. I can't hear, but sorry. Yeah, if in the past I've seen it be part of like a sprint, it's got to be included in like the product team, and it's part of it. And I think this could be coming from almost like government bias. It's got to be part of government, because otherwise you're excluding large swathes of the population. But in other apps I've worked on in the past, it has to be done because you want to include everyone. You sometimes need to have a UX advocate, an accessibility advocate, because you have someone who has to like bang on the door, but you don't want to become the stick man. You don't want someone to like be going around and be like, oh, have you thought of accessibility? It should be part of it. And the best way to do that is to see accessible users, because people who don't say accessibility is important, who say accessibility is important, we shouldn't design for these people. Also need 2%. Sit them down in front of somebody trying to use their service like screen reader. That's like, just show them. And it's all, I think there's Lisa Wright has got a Mind the Product talk about it. And it shows accessibility for all ages. So it's kind of like accessibility for an older generation. So not necessarily like disabled impairments, but it's like someone who's say like 70, you're going to send them on a digital service. Why? Why make them do this thing they're never going to want to learn how to do? Why impose your framework onto them? You should always meet them where they are. So yeah, it should be the entire team, but normally it's more of the product side to make sure it doesn't go down the backlog. I hope that answers the question a little bit.
So very, very quickly there, ditto Jason, it's everybody's responsibility as far as I'm concerned. Just one thing, if you're interested in looking at sort of accessibility in a little bit more detail, for things like web design, for example, which is something your daughter might be interested in, you can always look at the WCAG, the guidelines. I think we're on 2.1 or 2.2?
2.2, just gone to.
I think we just gone on to 2.2. Have a look at those as well. They're really interesting. And if you'd like to have a little play around with something, there is a company based in Gateshead, this is really interesting, called Recite Me. I don't know if anybody's ever heard of them. Now, Recite Me, what they've done is they've actually developed a piece of software for exactly this. It's for, so if you were to go on, for example, Google London Gatwick's website, if you go onto their website, you'll see on the top right hand side, I don't think they've actually, they haven't displayed it in the right way, but it says accessibility. It should be a lot easier to see as far as I'm concerned. It's not particularly accessible. But once you do find it, top right hand side, it says accessibility. Have a click on that and just have a play and see what happens. It's really, really fascinating. So things like, for example, as you scroll down the page, it will, speak to you. It will actually say what's happening. You can block out certain areas of text and only see various things. So people with dyslexia, for example, would find that particularly useful. You can change the contrast. And again, if you are, you do sound like you know where those guidelines are, you'll notice the contrast is really important. So as I say, I know that London Gatwick are using the Recite Me software. So just go on there, everybody, and have a look for that accessibility button, which is be interesting to hear your thoughts as to how accessible the accessibility button is. But have a play around. It's really good fun.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry, I was muted. Helen, you had a question.
Hiya, yes, thanks very much for the presentations. I just wondered whether in the era we're in now, where voice interfaces are kind of starting to get a bit more established, how that changes the way we need to think about user design.
Gosh, I'm going to say yes. It certainly, I think it certainly does. I've got to admit, hands up, I'm not particularly an expert on voice UI. I probably should be, or should be soon if I'm not now. Anybody else got anything on that one? Come in on that one.
Nothing UX related, but I have just been asked by a sort of a side project instead of an app. Can we build an Alexa skill instead? Because apparently they're more popular. So. Yeah. I might, if anybody knows anything about it, please speak to me, because I haven't got a clue what I'm doing. I'm just playing about in the dark at the moment.
Yeah. So yeah, because Alexa skills, it's definitely really important. But yeah, it's the new way, isn't it, of interacting? It's kind of that Internet of Things, isn't it? Everything is connected with everything else, whether it be your fridge to your phone or your voice to Alexa or whatever it is. Certainly, it's not going to go away. It's only going to become more and more important. So yeah, look out for more happening there in terms of voice UI.
I guess that's a bigger question. A bigger question to both of you, Jason and Helena. How do you see UX going forward? Because at the moment, UX kind of, what do we do on a screen? But obviously screens are becoming less useful, like mixed reality, augmented reality, VR, voice, tactile things like the Amazon button that they released. It's just a button. Like, are we bound by the screen, and can we move outside of that maybe in the future?
No, I think one of the things we want to do is solve the problems of users and remove the friction around it where it's required. So UX is like, oh, it's not, should we change this color of green to a slightly different green because that involves better relationships and it's not that. It's actually solving a problem and engaging with it critically. And it's that thing where, like, could you even have to fill in a form if you know something's required? So can we move past the actual app thing to actually solve the problem that people have? You shouldn't limit yourself to what exists, but you have to understand that people have different relationships with things. So say within government, some people may not see a website as truly authoritative because authority is held by the actual user. So I'm quite happy to send some tax stuff and by email and get some stuff back, but my dad doesn't, because he wants a piece of paper that he can actually hold up to take for an accountant. It's that kind of thing. You've got to understand what the user actually wants, solve their problems, and match their intents where they actually live. Because a lot of things that we build are very emotional and have like a lot of feeling attached to them. I know it sounds really, but it's a lot of kind of understanding what matters to people and solving the problem where they are. So, no screens.
Hi. So yeah, I've got a question. We've talked a lot today about bad UI and UX design and all of it. Is there one specific design website or app what you really like about how it was designed and how you interact with it, which you think is very good and it was very well made?
That's a good question.
Spotify for me.
GDS. It looks simple. It looks like a boring product, but it does what it says on the tin. I love GDS, and also it's an app called WeCroak, and all it does is it sends you a quote every few hours or so, and it doesn't do anything else. And it's a very simple thing, and simplicity is good. It's kind of like, you know, Google, it's got one bar. I just like the simplicity of it. I don't want to do
What was the name? Sorry.
Sorry, WeCroak. Well, WeCroak's kind of a jokey one, but GDS, so the government style guide, the government digital service.
Mhm.
Yes, it's a very simple nuts and bolts UI. I think it's open source as well, so people can just click it.
Okay.
Maybe post the links out. We'll look them up and we'll post the links as well for those sites. Well, I'll post the link for Spotify. I think people can probably work that one out for themselves. But the GDS one, yes, if we could post the link for that, that would be cool.
And you should type in GDS into Google, it'll come up.
All right, cool. There you go. Nice and easy.
Oh, cool.
Cool. It's getting close to 7 o'clock. And Jason, I know you've got a bath time stroke bedtime coming up that you mentioned earlier. This bath already happened, does it? I guess there's a few statements, not so much questions. It remains for me to say thanks. I'm stealing Chris's job now. I should have handed it back over to Chris for this. Thanks, Helena. Thanks, Jason. Chris, was there anything you wanted to say about November quickly?
Cool. Massive thanks to everybody. Any feedback or questions, please do get in touch. You can obviously get in touch via the usual social media routes. You want to speak at any tech, for example, or you know somebody who wants to speak at any tech, or you know somebody you'd like to see, again, yeah, do just get in touch. So next month, if I can change the slide, just to wrap up. So yeah, next month is Security Month. So we have Faye Ellis from A Cloud Guru, and she's going to be speaking about her tips and best practices around the AWS Security Specialty Certification. Bit of a mouthful that. And we also have Jim Hooker as well, who is head of IT security at Newcastle Building Society, and he's going to be talking about supply chain security. So yeah, definitely one to come along to. So yeah, that's pretty much everything. Once again, big thanks to Jason and Helena, and yeah, we'll hope to see you next month. So thank you very much, guys.